night last night doing homework and marked down compilers to work. Anybody have big plans for the fall break coming up?
No.
No. Catch up on work, catch up on sleep.
I'm going to New York.
New York? Just for fun?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Connecticut, so I'm going to do a little bit.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Mexico?
Yeah.
Like Cancun, Mexico?
Sorry.
Like Cancun, party town, Mexico? Or specifically for like just party or something going on?
I helped a friend of mine with some websites, and he's got like a small hotel there, so I invited there. And I'm meeting a friend of mine from Europe because Europeans still have travel agreement in States.
Yep. Do you speak any Spanish?
No, I speak some Italian.
All right, well, it's time for us to get started. Yeah, so today, well, let's see, last time we were talking about files and loading those files. And today we're going to talk about doing some cool stuff with the information in those files. And in particular, we'll see some files called JSON files. So this JSON here is pronounced Jason, like the person's name. And then we'll talk about, after we've loaded some data, how can we make cool plots with that data using a library called matplotlib. Let's see, has anyone had a chance to take a look at the book for this topic yet? Okay, that's okay. So before we get started on this though, I want to review that survey that I asked you all to fill out. And so here it is. So not everybody's filled it out yet. It's due tomorrow, I guess. The lab due on Thursday at midnight with the collaboration, and this is part of the lab. And so we're going over it in class right now, but if you haven't done it yet, please still do it. I'll continue looking at the answers. Yeah, I just wanted to give you all a sense of how everybody else in the class responded to this. So the first thing about the lecture speed, about half the class, maybe a little bit more, said they feel like the lectures are a little bit fast. And then a little bit less than half saying that it's basically just right. And I just want to remind you all that there is pre-lecture like videos and pre-lecture reading for all of the lectures. And so if the lectures are feeling fast for you, then this is one of the things to be doing this before class to get a better sense or get better use out of the class time and have the lectures not be too fast. Yeah, a little bit more to say about that in a second too. The other thing is, so workload in this class, maybe a third of the class feeling like it's a high workload, a little too much, and most other people saying it's just right. Quizzes, most here saying it's just right, but a little bit on the too hard side. And then labs and homeworks, a lot of people on the too hard side, about 50%, and 50% or so on the just right side. And so overall, the consensus of everybody at the class is on the harder side of classes. And this is a pretty normal breakdown of all of these numbers, actually. Every time I've had, so this is the third time that I've taught this course here, and every time that I've done it, these are basically the numbers that people report. I want to jump over here to talk a little bit more detail about some of these items. So again, about the lectures being fast. Again, my main advice about that is like reading the links and watching the videos before class, and in particular, trying some of the stuff out, opening up Python and trying things out. We have this phrase in computer science that computer science is not a spectator sport. You're not going to learn it just by watching other people do it, watching me do it. You're going to learn it by doing it yourself. And really the purpose of like our class time together is for, it's not meant to be like your initial exposure to all of these concepts, but your exposure to how somebody who is sort of fluent in Python would deal with all of these concepts. So yeah, the lectures are fast, but they are also meant to be fast. So about class being a lot of work, I'll just highlight again, so I mentioned this when we were talking about the syllabus, that compared to the intro classes at CS or at MUD and Pomona, we actually have significantly less work. That they have labs every week like we do, but they also have homeworks every week as well. So like this Markdown compiler assignment, they would have something like that every week. And I've trimmed away as many of those as we can so that we still get the key concepts in this class. And you're welcome. Another reminder, so in the syllabus, just historically, what it's turned out to be is that about half of students will need to spend about 15 to 20 hours outside of class to get an A- or an A in this class. And so it's not like, I don't have that as my goal to, that you have to do a lot of work. That's just how it works out in order to cover the material that needs to be covered for the subsequent classes. But again, I've done my best to remove as much material as possible. At the end of the semester, we'll talk about like, is there anything else that we can remove? And if there is something, then let me know and I'll remove it so that future generations have it easier. Next thing, so a lot of people mentioned that so because the labs and the homeworks are so hard, I can't complete them without help. And that's actually an intentional thing. So you wouldn't really be learning enough if you could do all of the assignments all by yourself without asking for help. And again, I've been doing a lot of sort of analogies with human language learning. And so in this case, the analogy is that like if you were taking a Spanish class and you never talked with a fluent speaker, then you just wouldn't learn Spanish. And so if you're taking a class on Python and you never talk with somebody who is more fluent than you in Python, so either me or the TAs working on an actual problem, then you're just not going to learn Python. You might learn something Python-ish, just like you would learn something Spanish-ish if you just sit down and memorize grammar, but you're not going to actually learn how a programmer thinks without interacting with programmers on hard problems. Let's see, a lot of people also mentioned wanting more TA support. I would love to provide more TA support. I've bent a lot of rules actually as it is to get the non-QCL TAs to be able to TA for this class. But if you feel this way, which I also feel, then it's the deans and the QCL people that you need to bring this up with. I bring it up to them all the time, but I think they listen to students more than me about this kind of thing. The other thing is that for whatever reason, this semester, I think my office hours have been a little bit underutilized. My guess is that that's a lot due to just being back in person, and there's so many things going on that people don't come to office hours maybe as much as they used to. But then one other thing that, so new policy that we'll add is, so first section students, so everybody here, if you would like more lab time, more time when you can ask questions, you can also attend the section lab, which is just immediately before this, our lab on Friday. And it's in Roberts North 12. So do that, and then you can have more lab time, and that's the best that I can do, unfortunately, for more support at this point. Last note that came up a lot in the free response things that people were talking about were a lot of people eager for more applications and less theoretical stuff. And we're really going to be getting into the application stuff going forward from this, starting today. And yeah, everything is going to be very application oriented. So I hope that will be exciting to people. Question?
Where and when are the second section's lab time?
Yeah, question is where and when are the second section lab times? They are, so where is Roberts North 12, which is just downstairs and that way, like 100 feet. And then when is just before first section lab times. So I think that's like 9:45 to 11. Yeah, for whatever reason, there's a lot fewer questions that get asked in the second section lab, and so I'll be more available for answering questions then, and the room is just bigger, so there's space for more people.
Wait, there are more questions. Which one?
So you all in first section have been doing a great job during lab time asking questions. I am in constant demand. The second section, so the one that happens earlier, there's a lot of downtime where I'm not helping people with questions. And so if you have lots of questions and you feel like you're not able to get them fully answered in the first section lab time, then there will be lots of time during the second section lab time that I'd be available.
To schedule like an office hours with you, like if we have class during the regular ones, do we have like a Google Calendar and just input the time, or do we email?
Yeah, good question. The question is about scheduling a office hours time with me, and you'll have to, yeah, so on the syllabus, where's the syllabus? Go away Zoom, there's the syllabus. Up at the top somewhere, under the office hours, there's a link to my schedule. You can click that to see the times that I'm available. You can't actually enter like anything in that though. So if you want to set up an appointment, then email me. Typically, it's pretty much just Fridays that I'm available, or sometimes between the two sections on Monday and Wednesday. But Tuesday and Thursday, I'm generally in charge of taking care of our kids, so I'm not usually available then. Good questions. Any other questions about any of that sort of administrative stuff? Maybe one last thing I'll say is that that the grades, they're not yet entered. So I normally try to get everything up to date on Wednesdays, but I'm behind now. So maybe by the end of the day, everything will be up to date, but not up to date yet. Okay. So then, material-wise today, again, talking about JSON and matplotlib. So how do we format data, store it, and then how do we plot it? And I want to highlight down here on the lab. So the lab this week is going to be based on this. And in particular, we'll be analyzing some more Trump tweets. So before, I gave you just a really small data set of Trump tweets that we analyzed. I think that was week 3's lab. But now, in this week's lab, you're actually going to analyze all the tweets that Trump has ever sent. And there's this big GitHub repository over here that has all these tweets inside of it. And so the detailed instructions are in this file, but that's what we'll be working with today. And yeah, there's also going to be a lot of extra credits on this lab this week. Only this first lab is required. The second one is entirely extra credits. And even this first one has a couple of extra credit opportunities inside of it. So with that, that's our motivation for today. We're going to be analyzing Trump's tweets. That's what we're building up to for our lab this week. And coming over to GitHub or to VS Code, we have 2 Python files for today that are currently uploaded to GitHub. The Wednesday_section1_part1.py, and then there's a Wednesday_section1_part2.py. And we'll be going over both of those today. Actually, yeah, you can take a second to get those downloaded on your computer. One other quick announcement is that your next homework assignment, homework 2, has been posted. We may get to the point today where we talk about it. We may not. That may be saved for next week. But the basic idea of this is that we'll be creating, you'll get to create some plots of different data and make a web page out of those plots. So that's also what we're building up to today, how to complete the lab and the next homework assignments. So starting with our part1.py file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this file in the interactive Python. And down below, I'm going to do Python3-i, and then Wednesday_section1_part1.py, and hit enter. And we get, to start us off, a little error message reminding us of what we talked about last time. The error message says we can't open the file Wednesday_section1part1.py. And anytime we have that problem, this error message, it's related to our working directory, so pwd for my working directory, and I'm currently in my CS40 folder, but these files, I saved them into, into my week 6 folder, and so that's why I don't have access to them, because my working directory is not the location where the files were saved, and so I'm going to use that cd command, cd week 6, to get back into that folder. And now the up arrow to go back to my Python interactive command, and now everything works because my working directory matches where the file is located. And I'm inside of interactive Python here, and there's this one variable declared in this file right here. It's called tweets, and it is a list of dictionaries. It's been a little while since we've seen dictionaries, so we'll review those again really quick here. But tweets, it's a list. I know it's a list for a number of reasons. These square brackets are lists, but I also make all my lists plural. Tweets ends in an S, so it must be a list. And if I come down here, type tweets, then there's my, my tweets variable, just not formatted quite as nicely. None of the white space is there. And if I want to actually get one of these individual tweets from this list of tweets, I will do indexing, something like tweets at position 0. This indexes the list right here, and that gives me a dictionary. And then if I wanted to get a particular item out of this dictionary, so say like the text of the tweet, then I can once again index at text like this, and this gives me the text right here of the very first tweet that Trump sent right here about Trump International Chower. And if I wanted to get the text of the second tweet, then I'll change this 0 to a 1, and that gives me the text of the second tweet. Another maybe side note about that survey information was if you feel like I'm going too fast in lectures, then a great way to slow me down is to ask questions. And so I'll stop here and pause to see if there's any questions about what we've done so far. Miles.
How you did the tweets and then the bracket one text. How do you do that? It still tells me that there's no such file.
So if you're getting the error message about no such file or directory, it means that your working directory does not match where this file is saved at. So here it says can't open the file, and that's because the working directory doesn't match. So my working directory right now is this CS40 folder right here, but I've saved my file, where is it? Wednesday_section1_part1.py inside of the week 6 folder. And so in order to be able to open this, then I have to change my directory into week 6 like this, and then it works. Again, alternatively, remember that this is called a relative path. It's a relative path because it does not start with a C: on Windows or a slash on everything else. And relative paths are used, they depend exactly on your working directory. And we can make this into an absolute path by using the triangle button up here. And the triangle button will give me the big long absolute path that's guaranteed to work anywhere on my computer. I don't have to worry about the working directory whenever I use the triangle button or the absolute path. And then in order to convert this, make this so that it's interactive Python, I rerun this command with the -i in between Python and the file name. And once again, I have access to the tweets variable. It's loaded up this variable. If you're getting a message that, so let's say something that looks like, I'll type Trump here, and we get this name error, name Trump is not defined. Anytime you have something, Trump is not defined, something is not defined, it means you're trying to access a variable that doesn't exist. If, in this case, my tweets variable doesn't give me this error message because tweets is defined right here in this Python file, and I've loaded this Python file. If you're getting an error message about tweets not being defined, then it means that you've not loaded that Python file correctly. So if I typed, for example, Python3 down here, this will take me into interactive Python, but because there's no file name over here, it's not loading any file. And so now when I type tweets like that, I'll get this name, tweets is not defined. So very likely if you're getting an error message like this, it means that somehow you're not loading this file up here. Any other questions? So, yeah, Sophie. So the PWD stands for print working directory. This gives you your working directory. This is how you how you convert a relative path into an absolute path. And there's detailed notes for exactly what's going on there inside of the week 6 folder under the Monday section. This whole sort of cheat sheet or minimum required knowledge of what to know about paths goes over how all of that is working. Exactly the details on the commands that you'll need to run for your computer are going to be different for everybody. But the thing that's always going to work for everybody is the triangle button and then adding the -i. Yeah, so I might need to look at that individually with you after class.
So if it says you can't just do the working directory in interactive, right? Because that can
Yeah, good question. So here, all of these PWDs and CDs, and anytime I'm typing Python3, these are all things that get typed into the terminal and not into Python. On my computer, I know I'm in the terminal because it starts with a $sign over here. And I know I'm in Python because it starts with the 3 greater than signs over here. Python on everybody's machine will look like this, but on your machine, the terminal prompt will look a little bit different for everybody. Okay, so here's our tweets variable. And I now have access to it like this. And again, we can access these individual items, these individual elements in this dictionary by first indexing inside of the list and then indexing into the dictionary. And the things to the left of in the dictionary, the things to the left of the colon are called keys, and the things to the right of the colon are called values. So this text key corresponds to the value of the actual tweet that was sent by Trump on this particular date. And we can see that it's been retweeted 33 times and favorited 6 times. Here's its ID and so on. This information is, currently it's stored in Python like a normal Python object, like we've seen in the past. And you've had a lab that stored this exactly the same way. What we're going to do next, though, is we're going to introduce this JSON idea, which is a slightly different way of storing the same information. And question?
Can we access one tweet?
So the question is, can we access just one tweet at a time? And so here, if I do tweets, it accesses the entire list. If I do tweets index position 0, this corresponds to the very first tweet right here. And this at position 1 corresponds to the second tweet. Maybe you'll notice that when these get displayed down here in Python, in the interactive Python, they're a lot harder to read because they just are not formatted nicely. There's a library in Python called pprint. You can get access to it by doing import pprint. Pprint stands for pretty print, and it lets you print things nicely so that they're easy to look at. If I do pprint.pprint of tweets at position 0, then it gives me this nice, easier to read version of tweets at position 0. And pprint.preprint tweets at position 1, the same thing, but for the second tweet. Yes.
When you do that, you just print out how it's like formatted.
Great question. The question is, does it print it out how it's formatted up here? And the answer is no, that it has its own slightly different rules for how it gets formatted. This is all happens to be valid Python code that you could copy and paste into Python, and it would be valid, a valid dictionary generating the same thing. But it's not going to look exactly like you have it up here. Let's see.
I'm sorry, why would it say that tweets is not defined? Does that mean you're not going for it?
If it's saying tweets is not defined in Python, it means somehow you haven't loaded up the file, the Monday_section1 part1.py file. That you haven't loaded it. So when you're running the command, should look something like python3-i and then the file name like this. So this tweets dictionary right now, it is a normal Python object. I'm going to do 2 things to it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it inside of a string like this. And so now it's just a string that contains this Python code. And I'm going to go ahead and change this name from tweets to tweets_str for tweets_string now. Down here, inside of my interactive Python, anytime I make a change to my file up here, in order for it to be updated in interactive Python, I have to reload interactive Python. If I try to type tweets_str right now, we'll get this tweets_str is not defined. So leaving interactive Python, coming back to it, then we get tweets_str. Now it is defined. And here you can see it's a string, and we have all these weird \ins and things going on inside of it. Leaving it is going to be different on a computer by computer basis. Exit will work for everybody. Control D is what I type to make it happen a little bit faster. If you have a Mac, Control D may or may not work. Control D will work on Windows systems. So we have, and these are all great questions that you all are asking. So please keep the questions coming. So far we've just converted our Python code into a string by wrapping it around the triple quotation marks, basically like we were commenting it out. And what we're going to do next is import JSON. So JSON is a library built into Python, and then tweets equals json.loads. There's only one function inside of the JSON library that we'll need to know about, and that's this loads function. And loads takes a string as a parameter, tweets_str, takes a string as parameter, and basically what it does is it evaluates that string as if it were Python code, and then stores that in this variable right here. So we have this string. It looks like Python code. We were using it as Python code before, but now we've made it a string just by wrapping it in the triple quotes, and we're going to pass it to this loads function. And this loads function is going to store it inside of tweets. Down in interactive Python, I'm going to leave interactive Python again and re-enter the terminal. And now if I type in tweets, I have access to tweets as an actual Python list, the same as I had it before I did this transformation into a string. Again, we just did two things: converted our Python code into a comment into this string, and then passed that string into this loads function. And this loads function made it like we just typed this Python directly into Python and not as a string.
About the string, isn't that comment instead of a string?
Question is, isn't this a comment instead of a string? And the answer is that we've been using it like comments, but technically the triple quotation mark is just a string, the same way that a single quotation mark is or a double quotation mark is. So this is a string just like any other.
And then the load will convert the string into like what it would assume is like Python code, or what it's trying to like get to.
Exactly. Loads is like just running this as if it were Python code.
What's the difference between is it the same as every other quotation mark? Triple quotation.
The question is the triple quotation mark the same as every other quotation mark? And the answer is that if your string is spanning multiple lines, then it must be done with either the triple quote or the triple double quote. If your string is only a single line, then it can be any of the four types of quotation mark. But once you create it, they're all strings just like any other, and you can use all of your string functions on them. And in particular, whatever string you pass into loads, it could be created like, so here's the triple single. Let's do it with the triple double. That would also be fine. Everything will work just fine this way. If I did the single quotation marks like this, then I would have to reformat everything so that it's on a single line. So that's why I'm using the triple quotes. Miles?
You mentioned that like loads, the loads function makes it run in Python. What's the importance of creating a line in Python?
Yeah, so the question is, like, basically, why do this line right here? What's the importance of this loads function? And what I want us to look at is the difference between this tweets variable, which is the output of the loads function, and this tweets_string, which is the input to the loads function. And when we look at this difference, that'll tell us exactly what this function here is doing. So down here inside of interactive Python, when I look at tweets_string, this is a string. And so if I look at position 0, it's going to give me the very first character, this square bracket right here. If I look at, say, the I don't know what the 100th character is. I guess it's an in. It counts over till it finds character 100. Maybe it's that in right there and gives me that individual letter. So tweets underscore string, whatever the input to the loads is, has to be a string. And actually this S right here stands for string. So this is like load string. The output of this function is just a Python object. In this case, that Python object is a list because the string starts with a square bracket. So here when I do tweet at position 0, tweets plural at position 0, it gives me a whole Python dictionary back. This whole Python dictionary matching this whole thing right here. Tweets underscore string at position 0 gives me just the square bracket. Tweets at position 0 gives me this whole thing right here. We can let's do one more example about this. So this is going to give me back a list because it starts with square brackets. If we had something that started with curly braces inside of my loads, so I'll say variable equals json.loads, and then inside of here curly brackets of test:3, then variable, the output of loads is this dictionary right here, and I could index that dictionary at those positions to get 3. But since this is a string, the input to loads is a string, I can't do these sorts of transformations. Yeah.
That's when so I was getting interactive before and it was defined, but when I do this tweet underscore str, exactly how we've done it, it said that name error, name tweets str is not defined.
So yeah, the question is typing in tweets underscore str, getting variable undefined. And anytime you make a change to your file up here, you'll have to save the file, come down here, leave interactive Python mode, and press the up arrow to get your command back, hit enter, and go back into it. And it's really easy to, there's a lot of steps in there. It's really easy to forget one of them. And if you forget one of them, then you'll be using an out-of-date version of the file, and so you won't have access to everything. Okay.
Can load work with non-strings?
Question is, can, well, you mean load without the S right here?
Yeah.
So the question is, load without the S, what does that do? And yeah, so it can load, basically that's for loading from the bytes instead of from strings. So we've talked about there's this difference between bytes and strings. In this class, just the load S function, load string is what you'll want. There's a lot of other things inside of the JSON library, but we won't need them at all. They're basically just for loading things that are sort of like strings, but not exactly like strings.
And you just put a dictionary in quotes and then loaded it above the example, and then recorded it.
Exactly. So the question is, what exactly, let's remind ourselves, what exactly have we done so far? And so far, in some sense, like so literally what we've done is we started off with tweets, just setting it directly equal to the Python code. And we just, instead of making it Python code, we made it a string, and then loading that string. And so this begs the question of, like, why do we care? This is more complicated than what we had before. That before we had direct Python code, and now we're going through this roundabout thing of putting things inside of a string and then converting it into Python code. So why do we care? The answer is that we know how to load strings from files. And there is this special type of file called JSON files, which contain basically Python code that looks like this, which contain Python code that can be loaded with the json.loads function. And so this data set of Trump tweets, it would be a little bit awkward to have to distribute that as Python code. And so instead, it's distributed as these JSON files. And if you look on the left-hand side of my screen over here, underscore by this week 6 folder, then there's this data folder. And then inside of data, I have this big list of files from 2009 up to 2018. And each one of these files contains a bunch of dictionaries that look like this, that store the actual tweets that Trump has sent. And again, these files are what Twitter actually processes internally. It's what Twitter distributes. It's when you look at Twitter's webpage, internally they're grabbing these JSON files and then displaying them. Every time you send a tweet, it's creating a new JSON entry in these files. Try.
I still don't understand like the advantage of making it into a JSON file. Are strings like more efficient to store than active Python code or something?
The question is like, so what's the advantage of having this as a JSON file instead of actually just like a Python file that's this this actual Python code? And the answer is that if it was a Python file, we would have no way of like actually loading all of these things into our code. That we could copy and paste it like Python dictionaries into our code, but we would have no way of loading it from a file and sticking it in our code. By having these be JSON files, we'll be able to easily load them and then work with them. And we're going to do that whole process here in a second. But first, I want to just open up these files and see what they look like inside. So we'll start with this condensed 2009.json. And so this is, so question is, do you have this? And the answer is no, that the location for this is in the lab under lab part1.py. There's instructions for getting this file. But as of right now, you don't have it. So these next few steps, you won't be able to follow along with exactly what I'm typing. This condensed 2009.json, you can see that it looks very similar to what we had before, but it's a whole lot bigger because it stores all of the tweets that Trump sent in 2009. And so there's a lot of things inside of here. The way to get access to this file within Python is, so we'll use our code for opening files. It's that pattern of with, open, and then the name of the file. In this case, I put all of these dataset files inside of a folder called data. And so it'll be data / then the name of the file that I want to open. Here we have condensed underscore 2009.json. Condensed underscore 2009.json like this as F. Anytime you're opening a JSON file, JSON files always have an encoding of ASCII. So you will always need to specify encoding equals ASCII to open a JSON file. Then to actually get the text, you do, I'm going to store that, well, text in a variable called text equals f.read, like that. So this is the same pattern of things that we talked about last time in class. You open a file with the open command. This first parameter right here is the path to the file. It can be an absolute path or a relative path. In this case, I'm using a relative path. It's usually easiest to use a relative path. And my relative path starts with the folder data because that's where I happen to save the file to inside of this folder over here called data. And then here's the name of the file right here. Because this is a JSON file, the encoding must be ASCII. On some computers, your settings will automatically figure this out if you leave it out, but on some computers it won't and will give you an error message. So it's always safe to say encoding equals ASCII if you're loading a JSON file, and I always do that. And then F right here is sort of the variable name that stores the file. To get the contents of the file, I do f.read, and it stores that as a string inside of text. In order to just take a look at that real quick, I'm going to save this up here, come down to interactive Python, leave interactive Python. I'm now in the terminal because it starts with a $sign. I'm pressing the up arrow to get back to my previous command. And it's my interactive Python again. Hit enter. And I'm getting a no such file or directory, file not found. So there's two possibilities whenever we get this sort of error. One is that there's some sort of issue with my working directory. The other is that there is a typo in the name of my file. Just looking at this character by character, I don't think there's a typo here. And so my next guess is I'm going to look at my working directory. And so in order to find my working directory, I'm going to leave interactive Python back into the terminal, type pwd to find my working directory. And my working directory ends in CS40. So my files, though, are inside of week 6. So I'm going to cd into week 6. And now my working directory is week 6. The relative path from this folder to this file is data/condensed_2009.json. So now I think this path is going to be correct. And when I run it, everything loads correctly. In order to check that there's actual contents here, I'm going to just type out text like this, and we can see that a whole bunch of text that looks sort of JSON-ish got printed out, and that if we checked carefully letter by letter, it would match this condensed 2009.json right here. Yes.
So since you're only opening one JSON file, if you wanted to open everything under data, would you just call the folder directly above that /data, or is there like a more efficient way to do it without saying that open data /underscore?
Question is, how could I open up multiple files at once? And the observation is that, well, I could be like copy and paste and do a bunch of things like this and open up these files individually. But that is kind of obnoxious because there's a lot of copying and pasting going on, and copying and pasting has a lot of room for errors. So something that anytime you're sort of thinking about copying and pasting a block of code multiple times, a good solution that should jump to your mind is a for loop. And so what I could do is I could have a variable named files, and then let's store these 3 files inside of this variable like this. Just copying and pasting them. And now I could loop over this for file in files, do my with open file with my encoding equals ASCII as F, and then text equals f.read. One thing that you'll notice, though, if you do something like this, is that every time I go through this for loop, text is going to be overwritten, and it's not going to include whatever was from the previous file. So if you do something like this, then you'll want to start with text being maybe empty, and then doing text plus equals like that.
When you say overwritten, you're saying that, like, let's say there's a larger file in text, or there's like a larger, like everything in text than it is like reading, it will only replace like what it reads, and it will keep the rest of the file.
It's just, when we have text equals f.read, the first time through this for loop, text will be equal to this first file. But then next time through this for loop, when we're looking at this file, the text variable is just going to totally forget what it was because it's got an equal sign right here. And so at the end, it's like we've only read this last file. These are Good questions, but this is a little bit of a tangent for us. So I want to make sure that we cover the rest of the JSON material. So I'm going to pause this. We'll comment that out and just have this just loading a single file right now. Yeah.
Were you supposed to download the condensed files, the condensed JSON files or something?
So the question is, are we supposed to download these, and your lab will have you download them? But yeah, you probably don't have access to them right now.
So is that why it's saying no such file or directory?
So yeah, if you were running this code right now, you'd be getting no such file or directory because you haven't downloaded this. All great questions. There's only one last step for us to complete though here, and that's in order to actually get access to these to the data inside of this JSON file. We have it as a text format now. We just have to convert it from text format into our actual Python list, and we do that by just changing this variable to text. Changing it to text because text is the contents of this file right here. And so now if I save this up top, down here, Control D, up arrow, rerun that. And now my tweets variable is this huge long thing. And now I can do whatever sort of analysis I want on this to determine what, calculate things about Trump and what he sends on Twitter. So for example, if I take the length of tweets, this gives me the total number of entries in the list that's contained in this file right here. And so it's the total number of tweets that Trump sent in 2009. Happened to be 56. If we change this 2009 to say, let's do 2016, so when he's running for office, and come down here, close, reload, check the length of tweets. He's now sent 4,200 tweets in 2016. So that's like, I don't know, 15 or so a day. Yes. So the question is, what exactly is this counting? Tweets here is a list, so it's the literal answer to this is it's counting the number of entries in this list. That begs the question of, though, what is this a list of? It's a list of everything that's contained in this JSON file right here. And this JSON file happens to contain all the tweets that Trump sent, and so it's a list of all the tweets that he sent. So if I were to look at tweets at position 0, this is one of the tweets that Trump sent during 2016. So this one sent on the eve of 2017. And what did he say? He's saying, "Happy birthday" at Donald Trump Jr. It's looking at the list of dictionaries. So tweets at position 0 is a dictionary, but tweets itself is a list. Tweets at 0 gives us the entire dictionary of that tweet, yeah.
You put the JSON loads at the end, right? Are you converting the text
Exactly. So it's this file right here is just a text file. It's not Python. This loads right here is converting this. It's technically a JSON string into Python that we can actually use Python code to manipulate it. And now tweets is actually Python that we can work with.
And what was the variable type of text?
It's a str, so a string type. In interactive Python, if you're ever curious what the type of something is, you can type type and then the name of the variable. So type of tweets is a list. Type of text is a str. Type of tweets at position 0 is a dictionary. Tweets at position 0 at text is a string, and so on. So sometimes that can be helpful just to check your understanding of what's going on and maybe debugging things. Great questions. Let's see, in the lab, one of the things that the lab asks you to do is to count how many times Trump mentions different topics. And so let's just run through that real quick. What we're going to do is we'll count how many times in 2016 Trump mentioned himself. And so we have a list of tweets. Anytime we want to process a list of something, the idea of a for loop should be jumping out to you. And so I'm going to start with a counter of num trumps equals to 0, and then for tweet in tweets. So now tweet is going to be each of these dictionaries of tweets. In order to get access to the individual text, what I'm going to do down here, if I look at tweets of 0, this gives me one of those individual tweets. Here's what the dictionary looks like. I need to find how do I get access to the text, and there's this key right here called text. So tweets of 0 at text gives me the actual string of the tweet. And so I'll say if tweets at position 0 at text. This right here gives me the actual text of each of the tweets. That's all right, it should be tweet at text, tweet being the current tweet that I'm looking at. And we want to check if the word Trump is in that tweet. We can say Trump in tweet. This will evaluate to true if the tweet contains this string right here, otherwise it'll evaluate to false. And I can do num trumps plus equals 1 whenever Trump is contained in the tweet right here. And then at the end, let's print num trumps equals and num trumps like this. I'm going to go ahead and run this file again, up arrow, and here it says num trumps equals 22. That might seem like a pretty small number to you because remember the length of tweets was 4,000 something. So here it's only 22 out of these 4,000 that mention this string Trump like this. But remember that in Python, all of our string operations are case sensitive. So this isn't, so this is looking specifically for Trump where Trump is lowercase. And Trump is not the kind of person who lowercases his name. He likes to capitalize it like that. And so let's try uppercase Trump in tweet, rerun this. And now it's 1,200 tweets. So about 25% where he mentions himself. One last thing is, what if I wanted to check like both uppercase and lowercase? Well, there's a number of ways that I could do that. So I'm gonna just leave this one here commented out so that we can refer to it. I could do the uppercase or lowercase like this. And this will evaluate to true if the capital Trump is in tweet or the lowercase Trump is in tweet. Another thing that I could do is if Trump all lowercase is in tweet at text.lower like this. First convert it to lowercase and then check to see if the lowercase Trump is in this. This is a little bit more general because this will check all the possible capitalizations. It'll convert all capitalizations into the lowercase. So it'll also work for something like Trump in tweet at text. And so this is the pattern that you'll want to follow for checking to see if somebody mentions words in Twitter, because this pattern right here, we'll see whether they, no matter what sort of capitalization they use, it'll see if it's in there. So let's rerun this again. And so we can see that with all the possible forms of capitalization, there's 1,300 mentions where Trump talks about himself. Oh.
That one tweet that you were looking at, it was like "Happy Birthday to @Donald Trump Jr." Would you add one to num trumps for that because Trump is contained within that larger word?
Yeah, it's a great question. So here, the word Trump just it doesn't appear by itself. There's not like an actual word Trump anywhere. Here it's inside of this this screen name right here, or down inside of this one down here. And this this if statement right here is just a very dumb if statement. It's not looking to see that Trump. Yeah, it's not looking for like the word Trump. It's just looking for these 5 letters anywhere right next to each other. And so if we were to come down here and say like Trump in Trumpy, or maybe trumpet, that's true because the first 5 count as that. But if somebody's talking about trumpets, then I don't know, maybe they're talking about Trump supporters if you're in a certain area of the internet, but probably they're talking about like jazz music or something. Yeah, so this begs the question of what if I actually only wanted to count like the individual word Trump and not if it's inside of something, and that's something that we don't know how to do yet. So you don't have to do that on your lab. It's just, are those words anywhere in there?
If you use the, instead of saying, if you find, or instead of saying if you find Trump, or if you use the find function, is there a find?
Yeah, so there's many ways that we could write this if statement. Another way, say trying to use the find function. So if tweet @text, so this again is the string that has been tweeted, .find Trump. So here we're calling find on looking inside of this string right here, looking for the word Trump. If that is not equal to -1, then that means that this string Trump here was found inside of this over here. And so this is 100% equivalent to this up here. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Miles.
So
So the lower function, all these, anytime you have a string function, if we have, so let's do tweets @position 0 @text like this. So here is the text of one of the tweets that Trump sent. Anytime you have a string function, say like lower, it just returns a new string that has lowercase things. And remember that lists will modify the list. If this was a list over here, it would be modified, but because it's a string, strings are not modified. And so if I do go back to the original string, then we're back to how it used to look. And so .lower just gives us something new. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of patterns like this where we've seen all of the kind of individual pieces of these patterns, but then just until you see somebody like put them together in a new way, you might not have realized or been able to do this for yourself, come up with a simple if statement like this. And again, that's one of those reasons why like working with the TAs or with me in office hours, there's just a lot of these sorts of patterns and tricks that that you encounter in programming. Too many for us to see them in class, but working with more experienced people, you'll just naturally come across them, and it's fine when you see them to just memorize them and keep using them, even if you don't necessarily understand all the little details. Just like if you're learning Spanish, you can memorize a phrase without understanding all the weird grammatical structures that go inside of it. Yeah, good questions. Yes.
Can you explain why you do the find, not find Trump? You have to use -1 and not 0.
So the question is, with basically, why is this if statement right here equal to this if statement up here? And the find function, what the find function does is if something is present, it returns the index that it is present at. If something is not present, it returns -1. So whenever trump is not contained in this string right here, it'll return -1. And if it's returning anything other than -1, then it means it found it. Yeah, Brian.
For the find function, if it's looking at the last vector, would that be equivalent to -1? If you have something that's in the last position, and you're doing .find, would that be, it probably will give it its actual value as the last position instead of returning -1? Would those be equivalent?
Great question. So the question is, what if we have a string like, so let's say our string is happy like this, and we know that s at position -1 is this y over here. And what if I do s.find of y? Well, the find is never going to give you the negative index of something. It will give you the positive index that you can use to access this. So it'll give me the 4 because s at 4 is also equal to y. So it's true that -1 refers to the last position. Find has this just weird thing though, where for find, -1 means it's not present, and anything else is, any positive number is the index. Okay, so the last part of class, so this, we've talked about actually loading data. And again, it's, in some senses, super simple. It's just these 4 lines of code right here can load any data set that's in this JSON format. And then you can do any arbitrary Python manipulations that you want to that data set. The last part of class, we're going to start talking about how to actually plot these values. And so today we're not going to be able to fully talk about plotting, but also we're just in class, we're not going to be able to fully talk about plotting. This matplotlib library is too big to fully cover it. There's not a single Python programmer in the world who fully understands the matplotlib library, even the author of it. It's just too big to understand it all. It has a couple 100 million lines of code inside of it that actually created the library. Yeah, so 100 million lines, so it's a big library. And so it can do a lot of things. There will be, so for your homework assignment, there will be things that I ask you to do that are not going to be covered in class, and you'll have to read the little tutorial right here, or watch these videos, or Google in order to figure out how to do those things. And that's intentional, that when you're working on the real world in programming projects, you're always going to be coming up to things that you haven't seen before. And so this is a chance for you to practice on how to do things that you've never even encountered before, and just following these tutorials. In class, we're going to be going over just sort of the basics of matplotlib so that those more complicated tutorials basically make sense. And this Wednesday section 1 part 2.py is our starting point for talking about matplotlib. So up here, I have just a dictionary of values, and this dictionary contains basically the results of what your lab is supposed to do. So in all of this big data set of tweets, Trump is mentioned 13,000 times, Russia 400 times, Obama 2,700 times, fake news 333, Mexico about 200. And what we want to do is we want to plot these results so that we can just nicely take a look at them and and visually see them instead of just looking at the numbers. I'm gonna, for a second here, comment out this section of code down here because this is the section of code that's actually going to do the plotting, and I want to run this without plotting it first. So let's save this down here in interactive Python back on the terminal. And now I want to run Python 3-i Wednesday section 1 part 2.py. And I want to take a look at these terms and these counts variables. Terms and counts. So recall that everything to the left of a colon in a dictionary is called a key. So Trump is a key, and this number here is a value. And this keys, plural, function gives us a list of all of the keys. So Trump, Russia, Obama, fake news, Mexico. Trump, fake news, Russia, Mexico, Obama. The order of this list right here is what we would say the technical term for this is non-deterministic. The order of the keys is non-deterministic, which basically means random. That there's no way to predict what this order will be. And every time you run this file and look at the terms, you'll see that the order is different. So here it's in one order, and here it's in a totally different order. But the thing that is important is that the order of the keys and the order of the values will always be the same. So here, 333 corresponds to fake news, 199 to Mexico, 2700 to Obama, and this to Trump, and this to Russia. So even though the order of the items in each of these lists will be different each time, they'll always match up. And then when we're plotting, so this line right here just loads our matplotlib. This creates a new plot, and then this line right here actually does the plotting for us. It takes two parameters. The left parameter is like the x-axis, what's gonna be on the x-axis. So we want that to be all the keys. And then the y parameter right here is the actual values that, so this is gonna generate a bar plot. These will be all the labels of each of the bars, and these will be sort of the size of each of the bars. And then once you do this, plt.show will actually display the plot for us. So let's save this up here, come down here, and rerun this. Plotting takes a surprisingly long time. So it'll take a couple seconds on everybody's computer to do it. And then here is an output plot. And you can see that, so here are my 5 keys corresponding to this terms variable, because terms is the x-axis, the leftmost position of this bar function. And then the counts, the height, the vertical position is just corresponds to all of these numbers. Ready?
I can't import this. This cannot be resolved from source.
Yeah, so the question is, this matplotlib, it's not working. And how do I actually get access to matplotlib? And matplotlib is a library just like YouTube DL or that if you did the extra credit on this this week's lab, that deep translate library, and you need to use the pip install command to get it. It looks like my VS Code here is frozen. So let's go ahead and reload that real quick. And down here, the command to get access to matplotlib will look something like pip3 install matplotlib. Again, those tutorials have instructions on how that will actually look like for your computer. But this is the, I guess the actual Python part that this will work once matplotlib is installed.
Is there a way to order your entries such that the graph is shown in like most to least at least?
Yeah, this is a great question. The question is, so we had, what we said before was that the order of things is going to be non-deterministic. So every time I run this, I'm going to get different results of the ordering. And in particular, I'm going to get like a not very good looking ordering that, because everything's just in a random order, it's not alphabetical, it's not arranged from smallest to largest. How do we arrange things so that it looks nicer? And it is possible to do that. And next week in class, we'll go over some of those common like gotcha scenarios for using matplotlib, and we'll also go over your exactly what you have to do with matplotlib for your homework assignments. But yeah, this is just quick introduction of what we'll be doing next week. And again, Monday, there's no class, it's fall break, so hope you all have a good long weekend. Make sure to catch up on your sleep and have fun. And then Wednesday, we'll have our actual class again. And then Friday this week, we have our lab.
Is there a quiz on Wednesday?
Question is there a quiz on Wednesday? And the answer is there's no quiz next week. So to celebrate fall break, no quiz.
Thank you.